My name is Jonathan Mills, and I am a mental performance consultant and co-founder of Core Mental Performance. And I'm also the director of assessment and performance at Sports Conflict Institute. In a partnership with SCI, Core is helping administer the DISC athlete assessment to profile athlete behaviors. And I wanted to take this opportunity just to talk a little bit about the DISC assessment, how the assessment can be applicable in a sport and performance context for understanding behavioral styles of athletes, coaches, and team managers. And I wanted to share some excerpts of a paper that I wrote in my PhD program at Seattle Pacific University where I wrote about DISC in a paper for my cognition and learning class about behavioral profiling and self-awareness in team sports. I felt like this was an interesting and useful way to sort of introduce some of the benefits of DISC, review some of the research that I did in this area, and then would also give me an opportunity to share what I found when I did my own disk profiling and share a profile just so you can see what it looks like for both an athlete and a team manager. So I'm happy to share this paper. If you're interested in reaching out, getting in contact, I'm just going to read some different pieces of it, including the abstract, to give sort of an introduction to DISC, what the assessment is, what the experiment is that I proposed as part of my class in this research project. And it might give you a sense of how this tool can be useful in better understanding your own team's behavioral styles. The purpose of this paper is to propose a research study using DISC profiling in sport, also known as DISC profile, which is a psychometric tool founded by the company Athlete Assessments to profile behaviors of athletes and coaches in a team context. The DISC profile measures how athletes and coaches naturally behave and adapt behaviors to fit a team sport environment. By understanding the behavioral style of the coach, team leaders, or captains, and the extreme behavioral styles within the team, players and coaches can better understand a team's dynamics. In this proposed research study, I aim to profile student athletes and coaches from several teams, where I plan to administer an assessment of self-awareness pre and post completing and debriefing the DISC profile prior to an athletic season. I hypothesize that profiling athletes and coaches' natural and adapted behaviors on their teams will predict increased self-awareness, and there will not be a difference in the change in self-awareness between athletes and coaches. The data will be analyzed using paired samples t-tests to determine any change in the athletes and coaches' self-awareness, and then independent samples t-tests will be used to determine any difference in the change between groups. Finding of this research could help foster enhanced team culture and dynamics for a collegiate sports team. So now that I've shared the abstract of this paper that I wrote, I just want to talk a little bit about what DISC is, go through a couple of the introductory sections of my paper, talk about the proposed experiment, and then I'll share a couple DISC profiles. Um, One of the key things to understand about the DISC is that it's not a personality test. It's really behavior profiling. And so it's looking at the actual actions that somebody takes, not necessarily who they are as people or personality traits. It's how we're acting and what our behaviors are. So, behavior is defined as the actions an individual takes and the decisions an individual makes. And some researchers argue behavior is flexible, changeable, and adaptable, while personality is not. So, theoretically, if an individual knows what their preferred behaviors are, they can adapt and change these behaviors depending on the situation. That's according to Pavlovich 2016 and Carver and Shire 2000. An American social psychologist, William Moulton Marston, developed an assessment in 1928, almost 100 years ago, the DISC model of behavior, to determine ways an individual can better manage their environment and adapt to change when needed. Now, one of Marston's critical assumptions was that human behavior is both observable and measurable, and these behaviors can be analyzed and categorized. Various iterations of DISC behavior profiling have been used over the years, and DISC assessments are currently widely administered professional and leadership development, skills trainings, and recruitment and job matching to improve personal and team performance in business, government, and education, among other domains. Behavior profiling assessment tools such as the DISC may enable individuals to become more conscious of their behaviors and make more adaptive behavioral changes or improve performance in a specific setting. Now, the reason we're all here is because that setting that we share is sport, right? So, DISC profiling in sport was created as a specific version of the original DISC profile to examine behavior in a sporting context by the Australian company Athlete Assessments, in order to measure how athletes and coaches naturally behave in a sports environment and adapt behaviors to fit a team's culture. Um, with Sports Conflict Institute and Core Mental Performance, we've joined together to administer this assessment that Athlete Assessments offers to our clients and to teams around the country who are interested in understanding the behavioral styles of their teams. Now, with the DISC, individuals are asked to think about themselves in a particular role. This could be athlete, coach, or team manager, and then complete the assessment based on their own self-perception of their behaviors within a team context. Specifically, Athlete Assessment's DISC profile measures an individual's degree of assertiveness in dealing with problems. This is the D, or dominant scale. So, how direct and assertive is an individual. Next, it measures the interaction with others and the environment. This is the influence scale. This is sort of how collaborative and interactive an individual is. Next, we have the preferred pace of activity. This is the steadiness or S scale, whether you like to move fast or more deliberate. And then the last scale on the DISC is how data-driven are you in your decision making? That's conscientiousness scale, or the C. Do you like to be really creative and spontaneous when you're playing, or do you like to be really deliberate and factor in as much information that you have available? Each athlete and coach has a unique profile of natural and adapted behavioral styles in the context of their sport team. And according to the head of research and writing for athlete assessments, DISC profiles can help athletes develop self-awareness, build their role in the team, and use behaviors to build quality relationships with teammates. Now, since I've mentioned it a couple times, we have both the adapted style and natural style for your behaviors. And the adapted style refers to the behaviors you use within your current role in your sporting environment, whereas the natural style reflects your most preferred behaviors or instinctive behaviors and is often described as the real you. And this can be useful to see sort of where there might be some discrepancy of when things get really high pressured, how do you naturally react? What is your natural style? Whereas, how are you being asked to perform in your current environment and your current role? Now, ideally, those two might be closer together. And when we start to see big gaps in between your natural and adapted style, it might mean that you're being stretched and asked to engage in behaviors that don't really align with your natural style. It's also really important to note that there is no best or worst behavioral style, and it's more about understanding what your own style is. Many people are very eager to jump straight into their own results, And that can be really helpful to understand your own behavior within your role. And then with DISC, we also provide a variety of different reference materials to assist you putting into action any changes or how to interact more favorably with different styles on your team. Now, on the website for the NCAA Leadership and Development Program, the NCAA describes that they provide access to the DISC behavioral assessment for member schools and conference offices to equip NCAA student athletes, coaches, and administrators with self-awareness tools. Now, this is a separate version of the DISC than athlete assessments that we administer. We believe through our own review and research that the athlete assessments tool has stronger statistical properties and is a better fit for athletic contexts than the version that the NCAA offers. I'll get into that a little bit more, but I did just want to mention that this is a resource the NCAA is committed to providing. Um, However, athlete assessments version, we believe, is a better fit. And we do agree sort of with that self-awareness piece that the NCAA highlights. Self-awareness is a form of metacognition, which is sort of monitoring our own thought processes, which consists of various beliefs, values, goals, and intentions that are attributed to the self. And self-awareness provides an individual with an awareness of their internal state, which are emotions, thoughts, body responses that drive their behaviors, beliefs, values, motivations, and an awareness of how this impacts and influences others. That's according to Carden et al. 2022. So findings suggest that developing self-awareness requires conscious effort, but that self-awareness can be developed over time through focus, evaluation, and feedback. A trained consultant like myself can debrief a DISC profile with an athlete or a coach to help promote self-reflection and insight of behaviors in a team sport context. So some of the research findings that I discovered when writing this paper is that researchers have argued when sport coaches gain self-awareness of their own skills and competencies, better communication and improved relationships with athletes will follow, according to Gould and Wright 2012. Athlete Assessments has produced several case studies suggesting that the DISC profile leads to increased self-awareness and knowledge of strengths and growth areas for coaches and athletes, according to Ross 2015. In another study, expert researchers in autonomy support who had familiarity with sport coaching completed the DISC profile as if they were acting as an autonomy supportive coach, and a distinct profile emerged. When you're supporting the autonomy of your athletes, it makes sense that there would be sort of a consistent profile that emerges. According to Ryan and Desi's 2000 self-determination theory, autonomy, competence, and relatedness are necessary for individuals to experience intrinsic motivation, which promotes learning and improved performance. Now, assuming that an autonomy supportive coaching profile is something that we would aspire to as coaches, the DISC profile might actually be a really useful tool for coaches to develop their own coaching behaviors grounded in self-determination theory and supporting that autonomy and intrinsic motivation of their athletes. In another study by Athlete Assessments in 2021 by Mason et al., exploratory research on the implementation and effectiveness of DISC behavioral profiles was applied in university sport management and sport coaching programs. Over 4 academic years, students completed the DISC profile and were debriefed on their reports with pre and post activity surveys, assessing the knowledge and skills gained through the process. Paired samples t-tests showed positive and significant results for 11 of the 16 measured areas of focus from the DISC profile. So this research suggests that the DISC profile might help students improve their self-awareness of strengths and growth areas, motivations, effective communication strategy, conflict resolution strategy, and behavioral adaptations. This is a research design that I think could be replicated in future studies with different populations beyond just an academic setting. And that for me would mean a real life sports setting where we took the DISC assessment tool at the start of a season um, for athletes and coaches. Um, and this paper that I wrote, which again I'm willing to share, is a research prospectus for a study with pre-test, post-test design on behavioral profiling and self-awareness, basically to test whether going through the DISC process increases self-awareness. We have reason to believe that it will um, through the um, professional consulting work that we would do with a team through the reports that DISC provides. We expect that that would lead to an increase in self-awareness as measured with a self-reflection insight scale, the SRIS, by Grant et al., 2002. So, given that I am in my doctoral studies and have been going through sort of my statistics series and research methods, learning about assessment tools, I was really curious how the disk profile would hold up under scrutiny of really reliability and validity. Um, and so I dug into the Assessment Standard Institute's ASI psychometric evaluation, which had an N of 31,000 participants. And the disk profile meets or exceeds generally accepted industry standards for data reliability and construct validity. Um, Internal consistency was good for three of the four subscales, C, S, D, and acceptable for I. And athlete assessments proposed opposite scales for the four dimensions of D, I, S, and C. Um, and these scales should have moderate positive or negative correlations. And the correlations measured by ASI supported this general model for acceptable construct validity. So once I felt confident that this tool had strong statistical properties, psychometric properties, I felt comfortable in moving forward in a partnership with SCI and CORE to administer this to clients. And essentially, the way this would work is an athlete or coach or manager would rate 32 items about their own behaviors, and that would take approximately 15 minutes for an athlete to complete their own disc profile. And then uh, after completing the assessment, participants receive an automated 44-page disc profile report, including reference materials. Probably takes about 30 minutes for an individual just to kind of skim that, get a participant or get an understanding for the participant on their own of what their profile is. And then approximately 1 week later, and to fit a team's training schedule, myself or another consultant from SCI would meet with the student athlete or coach of a given team. We would lead a debrief session with participants, providing psychoeducation and facilitating discussion about what it means to measure high or low in the D, I, S, and C behavioral styles. I would guide individual and small group activities that provided more in-depth knowledge that, about the results, and I'd answer any questions about the disc profile. This session would probably take approximately 60 minutes, and then participants would spend an additional 15 minutes responding to some of the prompts on page 13 of the DISC automated report to better understand their most preferred behaviors, their athlete style tendencies, their motivators, their needs, their ideal sporting environment, key points when under stress, communication tips for others, and potential areas for improvement. So, the implications for using the DISC and better understanding a behavioral profile are that if my hypothesis is true, that profiling athletes and coaches' behavioral styles predicts statistically significant increases in self-awareness. This would support the DISC profile as being a tool for helping individuals understand their behaviors in team sport. And so there's a lot of benefits that might come from completing the DISC, better understanding your own profile as an individual athlete or your coaching profile or team manager profile. But when you take that all together, it could help foster and enhance team culture and dynamics for a team. Team culture is the way a team behaves, which is ultimately a combination of DISC profile behavior styles interacting. If we were to think of that as kind of the team dynamics, that can result in effective and productive outcomes or ineffective and unproductive outcomes. The DISC profile output that we would debrief with a team provides athletes and coaches with significant insights into their preferred styles of behavior, strength behaviors, and areas for greater adaptation of behaviors. By understanding the behavioral styles of athletes and coaches, as well as extreme behavioral styles within the team, so on either end of high or low, D, I, S, and C, athletes and coaches can better understand a team's dynamic and adapt those behaviors to create a healthier team culture aligned with the goals the team is striving to achieve. So, in addition to doing my own research into DISC as an assessment tool, proposing my own future research study, I also completed the DISC assessment as both the role of an athlete and as a manager of a team. So that I've been through the exercise of completing it and understanding it. I completed a training with athlete assessments to understand how to debrief this with your athletes and your teams. And I thought I might just give a quick preview of what the output report looks like, what you would get for completing the DISC. I'll first share the athlete DISC and then quickly share the team manager DISC. You get this 42-page output that plots your D, I, S, and C, the difference between your natural and adapted styles. And this is the full output you get, understanding yourself as an athlete, application of the profiling, feedback from others, and it's all broken down for you with images and graphs and quotes and interpretations that are automated. What you bring as an athlete, your preferred behaviors, your style tendencies, your motivations. And this is what we would focus on in a debrief session. You would have a consultant like myself walking through D, I, S, and C, and we would talk about sort of when you're communicating with an individual athlete, ways to communicate that are effective, ways that are not, and potential areas for improvement within each athlete. And then this is what I was describing earlier, where it would require a little bit of writing, self-reflection for 10, 15 minutes from an athlete on their own profile to better understand the data that came up. Now, similarly, for a manager, this is what profile would look like if you took it in the role of a manager or coach. Again, natural versus adapted style, and the same exact sections, only this time written from the perspective of what makes most sense for the role of a manager. And we have some of these really cool outputs of sort of how to describe yourself as a manager and these sub patterns of behavior, the scales for D, I, S, and C, and the combination of those behaviors. and just a lot of information to go through on your own. But in that debrief session, we would focus on really what is most important to get through and give you sort of shortcut for how to read this document, what to focus on when you're reviewing it on your own and with a team. Um, and then you'd also have sort of some case studies, how to adapt to each style with your athletes as a manager, how to better understand um, what each of those styles prefers in terms of meetings and social settings. Just again, a lot of really robust report information here that we would help sort of debrief and break down for you to incorporate into your team planning for practice, how to communicate in team meetings as a manager, and again, how to better understand each other within this team culture. That's an introduction to the DISC profile by Athlete Assessments. And if you're interested in administering this to your team and athletes to better understand your behavioral styles, please get in touch at sportsconflictinstitute.com. You can fill out an interest form, and one of our consultants will reach out to you to understand the needs of your team and better make sense of the goals for this project and what you're looking to accomplish. I believe in this tool. This is something that I'm really excited to administer with my athlete clients at Core Mental Performance and in collaboration with SCI. I'm really looking forward to working with teams to help them better understand their team dynamics and help your athletes take their communication and team dynamics with one another to the next level. So thanks for listening to this video and look forward to hearing from you soon.